terms of farm policy, we're still sort of in that unknown territory right now, in large part because of how things unfolded at the end of last year. But there are some things that we do know now coming out of the 2012 elections. Not only, of course, is Barack Obama president once again for his second term, but also there were some very key polling results or very key voting results on that are going to shape one of the key policy issues. You've recently heard President Obama talk about immigration reform. A bipartisan group of senators has now come up with a package for immigration reform. This issue turned in no small part due to those election results. The minority votes for Mr. Obama were very significant. Mitt Romney was only able to garner 29% of the Latino vote in this last election. Now that's in contrast to 42% by George W. Bush. And despite the fact Mr. Romney received 89% of his votes from white Americans, he still did not capture the White House. So this really sent a very clear signal, I think, to Washington that our electorate out there is becoming more diverse. It is becoming more Latino. We have more minorities now voting than we have before, and that number is only going to rise. That's what really gelled things in our mind that points us towards getting meaningful immigration reform done sometime probably in the next 18 months. It may well get punted into 2014, but it is something that we do think will happen. Now, the keys to any immigration reform package are going to be getting them registered. How do you deal with that? Also, verification. The papers that they present for work, how do we make certain that those papers are accurate and not something that they've just purchased somewhere that are not legal papers to present them for work? And probably the most important thing is going to be how do you deal with the estimated 10 to 12 million illegal immigrants that are currently in this country. Odds are any final immigration deal is going to have a series of things. One, they're going to have to probably register. That means that they have to come forward if they want to become citizens. They're probably going to have to pay some kind of a penalty. And then they will be put on some pathway towards citizenship. It's not going to be an immediate citizenship for them. And also then, this turns into an economic issue actually. Because once then they are registered, once they're working, then they're paying taxes. So that starts to get into really kind of an economic issue. So it goes across many lines here. Agriculture, of course, has a very important stake in this situation. It's estimated that some 60 to 70% of workers in agriculture are illegal aliens. So that's going to be a key in how this is dealt with. That H-2A issue, the ag visas, that's going to be also a very important matter to see shake out. But that is one of the things we definitely see happening. Now, the other aspect that we can see from what's happened with the elections is our electorate, again, is becoming more diverse, but that diversity is starting to really, I think, affect how things are unfolding in Washington. And that has sort of made Washington more dysfunctional, I think, than we've ever seen it. And when you get a diverse background of who they're representing, that sort of complicates the process of representing that growing, broadening of our population. It's going to contribute, I think, some more to the gridlock that we have been seeing in Washington. Now, we did, of course, avert the fiscal cliff that everybody was very concerned about at the end of the year. And what a lot of people are now realizing as they're opening their paychecks, they got a tax increase out of it because of that payroll tax that was removed. That 2% reduction that had been in place for the last 2 years was not continued. So the combination of raising taxes on those individuals making more than $400,000 and couples making more than $450,000 a year, their taxes do go up. But the net effect of everything that happened in that fiscal cliff package is some 75% of Americans are seeing higher taxes coming out of their paychecks as they get them. Now, what the fiscal cliff package did, of course, was deal with a lot of these tax issues. Key for agriculture, that estate tax. This is also a permanent fix, meaning we're not going to have to keep coming back and addressing this year after year after year or every few years. It's a permanent fix. The exemption was set at $5 million for 2011. That is indexed for inflation. That's why we had a $5.12 million exemption for 2012. For 2013, it's $5.25 million. And each year, that's going to be continued to be indexed by inflation. Now, the other change that happened on the estate tax side, in 2011, or that is in 2012, we had estate taxes set with a $5.12 million exemption and a 35% tax rate beyond that. What has happened as a result of that cliff package, that tax rate goes up to 40% for estates that go beyond $5.25 million in 2013. Now, of course, for us, in a case of couples, that's actually doubled. So that gives you some idea, but at least now we know the rules, so we don't have these anxious times as the year end closes. Another thing important for agriculture, the Section 179 expensing. The limit on that is raised retroactively for 2012 to $500,000. And that is in place for 2013. Now, that's going to go away in 2014. So remember, as you're putting together your taxes for 2012, try to think of things that you may have invested in that would fall under this Section 179 side. Also, the bonus depreciation continues for another year. So those are a couple, I think, agriculture-related tax policies that folks need to be aware of out of that fiscal cliff package. Now, as January 2, there was supposed to be a series of sequester or across-the-board cuts take place, about $109 billion worth, half for defense, half in non-defense areas. Those cuts are punted down the road to March 1. Some Republicans are starting to lean towards letting those take place because they did not get spending reductions in the fiscal cliff package that they were really wanting to have, but they knew the consequences of us going off that cliff would be devastating. A 3% roughly hit to the U.S. economy, and an economy that in the fourth quarter of the year now was growing, has actually contracted by 0.1%. So a 3% hit on a slow-growing economy would not be a good thing. That March 1 deadline, though, still looms out there. Another deadline or another mini cliff that we've got coming up. The way the government's funded right now is on what's called a continuing resolution that keeps things going at 2012 spending levels with a few changes here and there. That only goes through March 27. So we arrive at March 27, no agreement, the government would shut down. So I think there's another mini cliff issue coming up that lawmakers are going to have to deal with as things move forward. So even though we didn't go over the cliff, we've still got some mini cliffs that are going to be coming up in the weeks and months ahead. Now, the Farm Bill played into this to a degree. There was a push at the end of the year to try to get that Farm Bill put in the package, but there was resistance on the House side of trying to plop a major bill like that into the mix. Even though the House version of the Farm Bill saved $35 billion, the Senate version of the Farm Bill saved $23 billion. So, there was some change there that folks were eyeing as a way to help pay for certain things that did not come to pass. So now here we are in 2013. That means the Farm Bill starts all over again. Of course, we've got the bedrock laid from the 2012 work that was done, so we're not starting really at ground zero, but here's the key. Until lawmakers are told on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees what kind of a budget savings number they have to meet, they really can't craft a policy. So until that budget number comes, and odds are that's not going to be arriving until we get close to that time frame when we're looking at some of these mini cliff issues. That's going to be a real key. Once they get that number, then they can start putting pen to paper and getting that policy set for a Farm Bill and try to get it done yet this year. Equity is going to be the key when you start hearing people talk about the Farm Bill. House Ag Committee Chairman Frank Lucas has made that very clear. The Republican from Oklahoma wants the Farm Bill to be, beneficial to everyone across the country, not just the way that the Senate Farm Bill that some people viewed it was really favoring a lot of corn and soybean producers and northern plains producers at the expense of the southerners. Now there's another wrinkle here in that Thad Cochran, the Republican from Mississippi, has taken over the reins of being the lead Republican on the Senate Agriculture Committee. Now his Mississippi roots are going to be very handy to him as he works then on this next Farm Bill that will elevate the focus and elevate the issues relative to southern crops as the Senate Agriculture Committee puts their plan together. Then we've got dairy out there. Very controversial dairy plan that was in both the House and Senate farm bills involving voluntary supply controls. Supply controls are something that usually puts the hair on the back of people's necks up just a little bit because agriculture's interest has long been in getting the government out of the business of farming. So they've got some convincing to do, in particular with one key lawmaker, House Speaker John Boehner. He does not like the provisions that were put forth in that farm bill, in large part because of that supply control. He's of the view government is not the one to decide how farmers should farm. He thinks farmers ought to be the ones doing it. And oftentimes I think that's probably the right answer. Another program that's going to be a big focus in the farm bill, crop insurance. That's going to be a major program that a lot of lawmakers like and a lot of farmers like. It's a very, a very lucrative tool for them to use. Payouts for 2012 crops exceeded $13 billion in late January. That's a record amount paid out by the government. Now, the premium subsidy, about 62% of the total premiums paid into that program are paid by the government. That premium subsidy is going to be the issue that people are going to really focus on. The Environmental Working Group and others have already focused their attention on that, and that's what they're going to be working on and trying to reduce that. Ideas there, a means test, if you will, that beyond a certain level of income, you would not be eligible for the full subsidy on your crop insurance. That's one possibility. Not sure it can be done as part of this farm bill, given the popularity of the crop insurance program, but that is going to be the focus in the future when it comes to farm spending, because that's one of the biggest outlay portions of that farm bill right now. And here's the key, too, on that overall farm bill. About 75 to 85% of that is nutrition spending. Food and feeding programs, the food stamp program. We now call it SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but lots of people still call it food stamps. That is 75 to 80% of the bill. It's just an amazing amount, and that's going to continue to be a number that will be worked on as far as savings. Senate Agriculture Committee bill, $4 billion reduction in food stamps, $16 billion would be taken up by the House Ag Committee. It's not going to be either of those numbers, and the Ag Committees aren't going to make that call. That call is probably going to be made, to use a good Washington phrase, by someone above their pay grade. They'll probably be told what that number will be, or at least they'll get a pretty good idea what it should be, and but there will have to be some sort of reduction in nutrition programs. I mean, again, 75 to 80% of that farm bill, you've got to find somehow some savings there. So those are really the issues as we look at the farm bill. Now, I want to touch on 2013 real quick, because there are some people out here that have been throwing up the worry flag of, oh no, you're not going to get a direct payment for 2013. Folks, here's the deal. The 2008 Farm Bill was extended. It is extended through September 30 of this year. Some programs go beyond that just because that's how their budget timeline works. Direct payments are here for 2013. The ACRE program is here for 2013, but if you were in ACRE sometime over 2009 to 2012, you get a chance to get out of the program if you want to. That had not been the case before. It was once you're in, you're in. Now for 2013, since we've sort of reset the clock, if you will, you'll be able to go to your FSA office and get out of ACRE if you were in it. Likewise, if you want to get in it, you certainly can. But those direct payments, again, are reauthorized, and in fact, USDA, in their guidance to county offices, says that yes, you can count those and put those in your projections as they work with lenders and work with borrowers for FSA. So even the agency is admitting they're going to be there. Now, could they be reduced? Absolutely. That's a possibility as we get into these budget cutting times. Reductions are very possible almost anywhere. So we can't rule out the fact that, yes, they could be lowered from where they're at, but direct payments are here for 2013. Another thing that took part, the disaster programs, livestock disaster programs, and the SURE program, all of them ended at the end of September 30, 2011. This is because state lawmakers, when crafting the 2008 Farm Bill, and recall the Democrats were in charge, both the House and Senate when this happened, they ended those programs 1 year ahead of the end of the overall Farm Bill. That got them some budget savings. Well, now that move is kind of coming around to bite them a little bit after we had the drought in 2012. The livestock programs were reauthorized as part of the Farm Bill, but here's the key. They have not been funded yet. And that's what really drives anything that happens in Washington, and that is funding. Now, if they get an appropriation approved for it, then we'd get those livestock disaster programs back functioning once again. But until they're funded, no money can be spent to run them. So in effect, they're really not going to be there. Now, the SURE program, there's been a push to get that even reauthorized, but there's no clear case there yet for that one. Other quick things to mention, personnel. EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson is departing that agency. We need to see now who is going to come in her place. The rumblings in Washington are that she departed in part over an expectation the administration is going to approve the Keystone Pipeline. So that was one of the maybe things went on in Washington that prompted Lisa Jackson to leave EPA. Who comes in will be very important because people drive policy, okay? And so if we get someone who's regulatory minded in there, that may resurrect a lot of the regulatory actions that we saw early in the Obama administration in this second term, and agriculture is going to be on guard for that. Now, two of them, Tom Vilsack, who, by the way, is staying in his role, at least so far, and I'll get to that in a second. He's staying in that role. He says, here's two regulations you don't have to worry about. That infamous dust regulation out of EPA, the so-called regulation that never was, that's not going to come forward, he says. The other one he pledges will not happen, the child labor regulation dealing with agriculture. So there's two at least right now we don't have to worry about. Now, I said Mr. Vilsack is sticking around so far. Senator Tom Harkin has announced he will not seek re-election in 2014. That's raising speculation of several things. First off, Bruce Braley is the representative from Northeast Iowa's 1st Congressional District. He is being sort of touted as the one who's been groomed to take that slot that is currently held by Mr. Harkin. We're waiting to hear whether Tom Latham or Steve King will opt to run for that seat against whoever jumps into the ring. Now, here's a possibility. We could see a Vilsack in that race. Christy Vilsack, Tom Vilsack's wife, ran unsuccessfully for Congress against Steve King. Mr. Vilsack could also depart USDA, come back to Iowa, and seek that Senate nomination for Iowa. So we've got a few things there to shake out yet. But right now, Tom Vilsack is staying in. We sort of picked that up in December, and remarks he made to our Farm Journal Forum didn't sound like a policymaker that was ready to leave, but one that more was staying, had a longer-term view and vision to talk to agriculture about. So that's a rundown of what's going on in the wacky world of Washington, D.C. coming out of the 2012 presidential and congressional elections.
Perfect.